Welcome back to another edition of the Big Nick Energy podcast. Make sure to like, share, subscribe everywhere you can get podcasts, including YouTube, Apple Pod, Spotify, and Podbean. I have the same exact awesome, amazing guests as I had last week. Brady Hawk of the Miami Heat's Five on the Floor pod and lead Miami Heat writer for Five Reasons Sports. He is also the great recipient of Erik Spoelstra's Medusa-like grills at the end of a couple of these Heat Knicks games, specifically after game 3 and 4. Find him at Brady Hawk 305. How you doing today, man?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up as well because that's been a hot topic.
So I saw that that actually happened to you one time last year. So you've been the ear of Spoelstra's defensive game plans being exposed without teams having to watch tape directly after these playoff games. Do you think you've actually had an impact on the opponents knowing more so what the Miami Heat do in that instance?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
The New York Knicks coaching staff is not scrolling through Twitter after that game, so I don't think they should worry about that too much. But Spo's always been somebody that's really like to keep game plan in house, like to like another degree. Does not like to talk about it. Uh, but I just have usually asked those type of questions, and in the playoffs, he gets even tighter than usual with that type of stuff. So last year it happened. It was against Philly in the second round as well, where I asked about like it was a pretty. It was like a both questions. It felt like not too scheme wise. Like it was. I asked about like them going to more drop against Philly and staying with Embiid. I got a little point, and then this year I asked about just switching the RJ and Brunson matchups, which seemed to be a pretty big moment of that game in the series. Uh, and that one warranted a pretty extended stare. So yeah, I'm gonna keep that stuff in house at least for the rest of this series for sure.
Dude, like not knowing who was on the other side of the camera when he just does the like 10 seconds off. Like now that I know it's you, I feel like you just got grilled by your dad. Like you literally just stole the family car for the first time, and your dad's like,
Mm-hmm.
but
That's it.
yeah, I'm actually glad because I know the reason that you did it. I saw everything like that. It was based on the defensive assignments and them switching. So that was actually the first question I was gonna ask you. I have Dan Lebitard and Stu Gatz are two of my heroes, so I'm gonna try to do this in a very ask you a serious Dan Lebitard like question and then ask you a really stupid 12-year-old Stu Gatz like question. So I started with the Stu Gatz, so there you go. But yeah, so like you said, Miami has done a lot of different defensive assignments and mixing up in this series. We've obviously seen the zone that was very notable, specifically in game 2 without Butler. We've seen them put Vincent on Brunson and Butler on RJ, so Butler can roam a little bit more. We've seen them put Butler on Brunson and Vincent on RJ, so Butler is actually watching Brunson a little bit more. We've seen you guys kind of go like more with a 5 out and have Bam actually cover a little farther away when Mitch isn't in there, and then have him and Love switch, whether it's Hartenstein or Randle. What do you, out of all the different looks that the Heat have given the Knicks, what do you think have been the best, the most effective, and the least effective out of like the 5 or 6 we've seen?
So the most effective, I think, was probably games 3 and 4, like the immediate adjustment when they went to that adjustment that I was talking about, where they kind of started out with all season. The one look that they gave New York was they were going to put Gabe on RJ, as you said. I remember we talked about it before. I was like, Spoelstra always says like he's going to make RJ beat you. Like that's kind of what his method has been, and it's a weird dynamic because there's like, yeah, you kind of rather RJ off ball if you're Miami, but then you're making him play on ball, but you're also making him your primary option if you're New York. So it's like it's a balance. Then they adjust to game 3 and 4, which I thought was probably their best defensive move they made, where they put Jimmy on RJ now to kind of throw off that early game plan by New York, because New York comes in and they're like, okay, we're going to RJ early again. And it was
Yep.
like, wait, where do we go now? So I thought that was probably the best move they've made. And kind of excluding game 5, I thought Gabe's done a good enough job. It feels like picking up Brunson full court, but absolutely in game 5, he got torched. Like it's just
Yeah.
good, great players are going to do that. They're going to get to their spots and have those nights. So it's like, I don't know what you do from there. I'd say my least favorite adjustment was, I won't even know if I'll say least favorite, because I feel like they had to do it because they've done it all year when this happens. But the zone kind of got picked apart in that game too,
Yeah.
where it was like, but I understand why they stuck in it, because it was like, just make New York shoot threes. Maybe it'll tail off because we don't want to go in man, because then we're having to lean in certain lineups that we don't want to lean in because we don't have Jimmy Butler. So
Right.
that part of it makes
Then you
sense.
guys would
But
then you guys would have shooting.
right, then you're leaning on more defensive guys like Haywood Highsmith and these guys. And if they're not giving you the offensive production, the game is pretty much folding from there. So those are the kind of the two key ones I'd expect. And I would probably expect starting tonight to probably see an even different one. We always talk about adjustments, and I thought Spo would stay with that same game plan heading into game 5. I do think it changes up for game 6.
If you were to make a guesstimate, what do you think tonight starts out with defensively for them, and what do you think it'll end up with defensively for them in the fourth?
I think it's similar to what we've seen recently with Jimmy on Barrett and kind of Vincent on Brunson. I just think guys like Caleb Martin see a lot of Brunson in this series. In this game, I think Caleb Martin gets a good amount of minutes tonight because, first of all, he's played really well. He's played really well in general, but he's played really well at home. Like, he's one of those
Yeah.
energy guys that just plays into the crowd a little bit. So I think he's important. And I think just throwing a little bit more length on Brunson's going to be key. And they're going to send help anyway. They're going to dip off from certain guys. I thought the other reason why I thought that the adjustment got weird for them in the last game is recently when they put Quentin Grimes into the lineup for Hart. You can't help off as much. So now Brunson has a little bit more wiggle room than he had previously in kind of those other games earlier in the series. So things get weird. So they're probably obviously going to stick with that change. We'll see how they deal with it. Do you make Quentin Grimes take those type of looks? Do you let Brunson go one-on-one more often down the lane? I don't believe so. I think the adjustment is they're going to peel early help even more often. Let probably Bam's been on Randle, but they'll probably see, I guess, maybe if Randle could take spot ups, which is a wild ask because that's kind of been his bread and butter, and then he gets into a rhythm.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to let Brunson cook him all night. Like, I think they're going to try to peel in some early help. So that would kind of be where I see. But the main adjustment is I think you just see a lot of Caleb on Brunson.
That would make a lot of sense. Caleb is obviously a little bit longer than Gabe. I know a lot of Knicks fans. Didn't know that prior. They all seem like the same person to us, but Caleb is much longer, a better defender. Gabe is surprisingly good on defense. I did not actually know that he was as good as he was. He stays on a guy's hip very well. He does not get lost. He doesn't get crossed up. But you can tell there are times like he does become jumpy. Like he fell for a couple of the Brunson pump fakes last game. They didn't fall for nearly as much earlier on in the series. And I agree with you. I think your best defensive lineup so far has been when Butler's on RJ, just because it allows him to be more free safety roaming. It's not even necessarily that he's actually covering RJ better or worse than anyone else. Like, obviously he's your best perimeter defender, but RJ's still strong. RJ can still get to his spots, but because he doesn't have to respect his three as much and he's not starting on Brunson, it allows him to go into passing lanes more. It allows him to like pick his spots when to double team. He basically becomes like a Troy Polamalu out there, for like lack of a better like NBA term, really, or very Tony Allen, like obviously from like 10 years ago.
And I don't think there's a better skill from Jimmy than that free safety thing that you're mentioning. So that's kind of his main skill. So that's, to your point, that's why they make that adjustment, is like because it enhances his best part of him as a basketball player. We could talk. He said the other night he's not a scorer, which I think is wild to say, like after a game like that.
He's just a winner, man. He's really just a winner.
But he's just so much more than that because of the other stuff that he can do on off ball. And like to your, that's why I don't think they flipped the adjustments back, just because of that reason. Because I feel like they found their base with Jimmy off ball, and they're probably gonna want to keep that.
If Martin's in the game, let's say Martin's in for Vincent, or you think he would actually be in for someone else a lot, and they would just move Vincent off?
I think it's Caleb for Love in a lot of parts, kind of the stretches of the game.
Smaller.
Mostly they'll just go a little smaller probably, and then you probably see Bam on that's where things get weird though, because then they probably have to put Jimmy on Randle, which they've been fine with, but then now he's not in that off ball role that he was before, so they're going to switch things around. So it's going to be interesting to see what they go to.
It's fun to get to this point in a series because you really have seen basically any and all adjustments that coaches can make. Now like we're trying to discuss which one's the best for them. That's what they're doing. They're like, which one worked out the best for us at this point? All right, Brady, I'm going back to Stugotz. Is tonight a must-win game for Miami?
I mean, if in a sense, yeah. I think this feels like if the tide turns and you head back into a game 7 in New York, it's just a tough environment. It is. It's just because I think the energy, the mindset stability of it, just having this lead and then heading back into New York for that type of thing. So yeah, I think this is kind of somewhat a must win. But it's weird because I don't sense, even from the fan bases, because I usually there's like always panic in general. There doesn't feel like the amount of panic that you would expect to feel in this type of game, which is just a weird dynamic to track. And I know that's tracking fan base temperatures isn't always going to track team temperatures, but it's just that's where I kind of hold back a little bit. But I do think they need to get this one. They haven't lost at home this year in the playoffs yet. Like they've been really good at home. The only close game they've had at home, it felt like, was there was the game 4 against Milwaukee where Jimmy had 56, and they still ended up running away with it at the end. So they pretty much handled business at home, and they played well. They've shot better at home. They've done a lot of things better at home. So this does feel like a must win, because if you don't get this one at home, mentality kind of shifts a little bit. And I know the energy in that building is going to be wild in a potential game 7.
Yeah, 100%. Miami hasn't played like almost any clutch time at home so far in this postseason, outside of the play-in, like which doesn't
Makes
even
no
count for
sense.
anything. I don't understand.
If you watch this team in the regular season, they were going for the clutch record. They were
Yeah,
literally on pace for getting the most clutch games in NBA history, and they literally are just not in any clutch games. Really, it makes literally zero sense.
they also couldn't shoot threes, man. None of us really understand anything.
Yeah,
I know you
yeah.
cover the Heat. None. I know you specifically, and everyone that you work with has no clue how these first two rounds have gone this way.
No, it makes there's no way to track any. There's no logical reason to any of this.
Yeah, zombie Heat, man. Bill Simmons was onto something. So after watching and rewatching Game 5, it felt like from a Knicks side that they might have actually lucked out with Josh Hart getting 3 fouls and then Tibbs being forced to keep Grimes in there the whole time, especially without Emmanuel Quickly, who actually is in essence a 3-and-D guy at this point in the playoffs because of how bad he's been offensively. But we don't have Quickly, and Hart can't shoot, as you've seen, and you guys sag off of him, basically giving him the Tony Allen treatment from like 10 years ago. And because of that, we saw Grimes for all 48. It did allow for more spacing, like you were saying. Brunson had way more opportunity to work. Grimes's minutes from game 1 to game 5, and granted, he was coming off the shoulder contusion and missed part of the Cavs series. His first game in order, 10 minutes, 26, 21, and then the last two starting 42 and 48. It does seem like Grimes is the only Knick that Spo generally does not want to leave open for three, especially with IQ doubtful again tonight, because he does allow the defense to not wall off and collapse the paint, as we're talking about with Brunson. So do you think Grimes being a legitimate 3-and-D guy versus Hart only having the defense half down to the 3-and-D part has given the Heat way more to worry about than you would have expected going into the series, or even how it looked from game 1 to game 3? Do you think Grimes gives you more?
Definitely. I think that's why I think mostly New York went to it, just because of that reason. Like Grimes opens up the play for your best three players. And that's why I think you saw Brunson and RJ and Randle kind of have a more efficient game in game 5, just because of that reason. You see the slots opening up and you can't really help off in that way. I'm trying to think, I think Max was on Grimes to start that game, if I'm not wrong. Uh, and
It's funny, Struce's well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's funny to see Struce's like game plan and like mindset on defense, because for how good he is running off screens, he's not nearly as good as chasing them.
oh
You can
no.
keep going.
No,
Sorry.
that's definitely not his strong suit. Defensively, I mean, he could hold up with his size at times, but yeah, defensively in those spots, that's not his strong suit. But I noticed we talked about Jimmy helping off ball in those new lineups. I noticed before when they were playing, it was Max on Hart. Max was getting blocks, and it was like, why is he getting blocked? It was
He
like
was deep in the paint.
he was just helping down fully. Like they were saying, Max, you don't even need to worry. Just be a freelancer in a way. Just go kind of double off, get guys uncomfortable. And he was doing that. And I think that's why it was good adjustment by New York, because it kind of threw off that whole game plan for Max. Now he has to kind of just run off screens, like you said. He has to guard Quentin Grimes. And look, they just need we both know that the Knicks just need some type of shooting. Like they just needed it so badly that it's like, even if Quentin Grimes is not hitting specifically, I think you just need him in there. That's why he's playing all minutes of the game. They need him in there at all times. They need
Yeah.
some type of spot up shooter as somewhat of a threat that can just get hot at some moment. And I think the fact that you said quickly he's not being able to play is a big thing, because he's one of those streaky scorers that could get going at any moment. You don't have that now. So you have to play Grimes all those minutes. And we know Tibbs is not scared of putting those guys in high minute situations. But it's also your backs are against the wall now. So it's like,
Yeah.
you don't really have another choice. And that's why I get into the flip side of it. And I wonder how they're going to treat it. Jimmy played a little bit. He played the entire second half in game 5. I think there's going to be an uptick in minutes for a lot of guys across the board on both teams. I think that we're going to expect it. Specifically, like Jimmy's playing the entire second half. I'd expect that again. The Bam thing is from Miami's perspective throws me off, because I don't know why, if Jimmy's playing the entire second half, they're bringing in Cody Zeller for 3 or 4 minutes. I think Bam should be playing the same amount of minutes as Jimmy in that way, especially being younger.
I'm
And
cool with it, man. They keep bringing him in.
hey, it was a weird dynamic, because they kept for some reason winning those odd lineups, those 5-man bench. I could not figure it out. Like I say all the time, like you can only go to the well so many times. And that's what we learned in game 5. It was like you went to the well way too many times with that 5-man bench unit, and you can see what happened. This is the game now where I think you'll get minutes obviously in the beginning of the second quarter with that, but second half, if it's a close game, keep Bam in with Jimmy. Like you need to do that as well. And I'd expect that on the other side with New York, it's not just Brunson and Grimes. I think there's certain guys on this roster that if if let's say one of your role players or somebody's having a big night, they're going to play extended amount of minutes. This is playoff time. This is backs against the wall, like I said. So the minutes is the thing I feel like I'm looking at even more than adjustments to me. Like I feel like that's the more important part. And obviously, I'm sure we'll get into in a second, but it's also the Jimmy factor, because you have to figure out which Jimmy you're going to be getting.
You literally might have written these for me, honestly. The order that you're just mentioning things at the end for segues is like, wow, did he know I wrote, is Jimmy's ankle hurt worse than he's letting on now? Or, but no, seriously, that's so funny. Do you think Jimmy Butler might be a little more hurt with his ankle than he's been letting on, especially after watching him last game on the offensive end? It's like he saved all of his energy defensively to keep doing the free safety roaming, and then offensively played more off ball than he has maybe in 2 months.
Yeah, it was a weird dynamic because they were talking about kind of his burst and everything, and I'm like, I'm watching this guy defensively in that game 5, and I'm like, that doesn't look like a guy that's hurt.
He's moving.
He was moving around. I think he had like 4 or 5 steals. He had that big block. Like he's doing things defensively where I'm like, that does not look like a guy that's hurt. And then you look him on the offensive end, and he's passing out of shots more often than he's been all postseason. He was kind of pre-All-Star break type Jimmy. But I will say, I don't know if he's more injured, but I'll say that it's an injury that could swell. So it's like he could have been hurting a little more than usual. Like I don't think it's one of those things where it's like, oh, he's hurt moving forward, and it's like, oh, like those are those things that you could probably get. It could have been one of those nights that just had a bad night of an ankle swell, and all of a sudden things looked a little weird. But thought they had to put him in a good position late in the game. It's always like get it to 5 or 6 before Jimmy can go on his last second, just push or run. And it looked like they were setting him up for that, but he didn't have it all the way to fully get to that point. And you just can't have Jimmy Butler taking 12 shots. Like no. that just can't happen in a playoff series or any type of playoff game, which I would not expect to any degree in game 6. Like if there's one, my expectation, I think Jimmy comes out firing in terms of just shot attempts. I'm not even talking about scoring. I just think he comes out really ultra aggressive.
Yeah.
But it depends on how the ankle looks. But I personally am not too worried because I think he's as tough as it gets, first of all. But I saw too many signs of that game where I'm like, I think he was just bothering him to a degree that he was seeing if the other guys can carry him to enough. And the other part of it is like, yeah, Jimmy looked like that in that game, but it also put it under a magnifying glass with the way Miami shot as well. Like it was just a terrible shooting display. And it's funny because they worked it up to 30%, which is actually their series average, which is even weirder. Like how that game shooting display is actually what they're shooting across a series is disgusting basketball, but it's Heat Knicks basketball.
Exactly.
So we'll see. We'll see. It was just, he seemed like he was reactionary, but I don't expect that in game 6. I wouldn't think. I think they know that he needs to be aggressive if they want to pull this one out. At least keep it competitive early to get out to an early lead.
It wasn't the number for I know Strus and Duncan combined went 9 for 20. Didn't the rest of your team go like 3 for 18 or something? And that's why it was so bad.
Yeah, I think it was 17% if you exclude Max and Duncan from 3. So you just can't have that. Kevin Love had, and it's weird because Miami had
0 for 7.
0 for 7. And Gabe as well did not hit one. They had great looks and they just couldn't make them. And that's been a kind of a theme a lot of the year was like, oh, the process is there. As Spo would talk about after games, like the process is there. We're getting good looks. They just weren't hitting. And it was like, well, it's kind of a problem if the results not matching up.
Yeah.
They just had trust, I guess, getting to this point. All of a sudden, the playoffs had started hitting a little more often. But now you're seeing it tail off a little bit in that game where it's like, I think there's enough trust that if they get those shots, they'll hit them more often than they did in that game 5. But I'm still leaning in the Jimmy direction more than I am the shooting direction. I feel like that's kind of a more important topic.
I have it up now. They went 13 of 43 total. So if they went 9 of 20 with just those two guys, they went 4 for 23 the rest of the way. So that will definitely make you lose, especially like you're saying. It looked like, I would say like at least a third of those shots would qualify as wide open threes. Like they were open. Kevin Love and Max Strus, for some reason, we just don't cover, even though their whole thing out there is to stretch the floor out.
I don't get that. I've said it in Strus. I know had a decent kind of, he had the couple of those threes that you mentioned. I think I said it on here last time. I don't understand the way the Knicks have guarded Max Strus. Like they've put him in a position to go off, and he's had, I said it the other day, in games 2, 3, and 4, he's had 10 2-pointers. And in the entire month of April, he had 9 2-pointers.
Oh my
God. It's like they're guarding him in such a weird way where it's like they're giving him airspace to get off his threes, and he's a guy that's not like Duncan who has to fly off handoffs. He's a guy that just catches and fires. And if he does not see a contest, but then when they start flying out in these late contests, he's getting to the basket somehow. And it's like, I just haven't really understood the way the Knicks have guarded him, but that obviously didn't matter when the rest of the role players looked like that in game 5.
They should just cover him like Quentin Grimes. They should be covered the same exact way, and they're just not. They're thinking he is Duncan Robinson basically, and it's like, oh, if we're remotely close to his airspace, he won't fire. Like, dude, he has a handle, a much better handle. He can actually drive past you. He has a quicker release than Duncan. Duncan's whole thing is just being the most accurate. It's not the fastest release ever, though. Strus is way quicker on the draw. Like, you're right. I don't understand it either.
Mm.
I watched the team all year. I don't understand it. To move off that, though, I wanted to ask you about, so we haven't talked about Bam that much yet, and I wanted to ask because I've seen a couple times this year, even watching other Heat games, like not against the Knicks, Bam loves to push the ball up the floor, and it's a great thing that you guys have a five that you can literally rely on to actually bring the ball up off of a rebound, off of a miss, off of being even the ball passed to him, which doesn't happen a lot unless it's like Jokic mostly. When Bam is out there paired up with Love as the stretch four and Mitchell Robinson's the center for New York, because Hartenstein is a little better around the perimeter and doesn't want to be inside or isn't as reliant as being in the paint as much. With Love and Mitchell both being out there, are you surprised that they don't have Bam bringing the ball up more on misses, or is it just because they don't really worry about it too much and Bam just keeps passing the ball to Vincent or Butler? Like, are you surprised about that? Am I overthinking this?
So I'll say number one on the topic of him bringing the ball up. I thought they've done a decent job with game going in the early clock because it felt like they're always up against with their backs against the shot clock a lot of the time. So they've been doing that. And specifically, what was it? Game 4 is the game he had the big game where I thought he was just getting early shots, which was good. To your point about the ball handling stuff, that is that'll never be, it feels like, their offensive base. That is something they keep in their back pocket. We always talk about Spo keeping something in his back pocket at all times. Looking at the Milwaukee series, they didn't utilize that basically the entire series. They go down in game 5 by double digits. They pull that out with like 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. They run Bam as a top of the key ball handler and distributor the rest of the way and run like high-low actions with Jimmy. They win that game just off spamming that action the rest of the game. It was like, we're just going to utilize this when we need it, and they're going to wait till that moment. And that's what I feel like is happening here. Like, I don't think they're going to go to that to the same degree, but it makes sense because if specifically to your point about Love, if Mitchell Robinson is on, let's say, gets the Love matchup and he's on the perimeter, Bam, you're pulling your weak side defender rim protection away from the rim. You have Bam now, let's say, being guarded by Randle, who's now at the kind of little below the inside the arc. Now you have Jimmy playing receiver, which he loves to do over the top of smaller defenders. So that's what
there's no shot blocker.
There's no shot blocker. You can go one-on-one down low and it's easy buckets. So that's what they did in that Milwaukee game. So that's kind of, it's funny because I actually said it in game 5 when I was watching the game. I tweeted, I said when it was like around 5 minutes to go, and I said, I think they're going to come out of here with Bam as the ball handler. Like, that's what I thought they were going to go to down the stretch, the exact way that they went to it in game 5 in the first round. And they didn't. So I really wonder if we see that today. I think they're going to wait for a moment where they feel like they can go on a run with it. And in specific matchups, like you said before, like there's certain guys that you need on the floor to really make it work. And I thought Love is a big key to that. And it has to be, this is where it gets interesting, because as much as I say they should have went to it in game 5, Love being 0 for 7 from 3 is why you probably couldn't go to it. And the reason he wasn't on the floor because he was shooting that badly. And I don't think Mitchell Robinson might have went into weak side protection, rim protection on those plays and left Love open with the way that he was shooting. So if Love is shooting at least a decent bit, I think they can lead into that in game 6. So it'll be interesting to see how New York adjusts to that and when they see it.
Shooting even 2 for 7 versus 0 for 7 is such a huge game changer in a guy's psyche and the way he can be covered in a game. It's unbelievable that Love got played off the floor because one of his 2 main strengths, with the other one being rebounding, he just did not pull off at all. It's really wild to know how it goes game by game. I forgot if I mentioned this to you or if I mentioned it to the guy I had the week before you, Joel from the Heat vs. the World pod. But I called the hack and Mitch would happen at some point in this series, and I know seeing it now, and I know hearing, like, I heard your guys' podcast, a couple of the Heat ones, that like this might be something that Spoelstra's never done, but he just seems like the type of dude that plays the numbers, plays analytics when he gets the chance. And my only thing is, I'm surprised he actually tried to do it on the road versus doing it at home for the first time. But it's realistically only a thing you really pull out when you're trying to like make a 10-point comeback versus you don't really do it when you're ahead. There's no purpose to that. You're just adding fouls to your players at that point. Are you surprised the hack and Mitch happened? Did you see it coming in any way, shape, or form, or am I just partly psychic?
No, I didn't see it coming. I thought to your point about the home road thing is the important thing, because like when you're at home, like if New York's at home and he's kind of going, like you really get the crowd into it. You get it was the loudest cheer all game. Yeah, because everybody's aware of it in the building. Like everybody's aware of what's happening on the court. So especially the kind of propping somebody up in that way once they hit it, it's like it's an energy shifter. And it felt like I don't even know what the score was at that point. Was it like a 5 or 6
It
point
was a
game?
5 point game. It was not worth doing hack a Mitch.
Right. But then on the flip side of it, as much as I've said that I didn't really understand it, and it's one of those, I said it after the game on our show, and I was like, it's one of those things where you either look like a genius or an idiot. Like, it's one of those things that are either going to go completely your way or it's going to not go your way. And it's like, it is what it is. But the reason they went to it, in my opinion, is because Duncan was one of the only players, was probably their best player in that game 5. And specifically, he went on that run in the fourth quarter. He brought them back. He had a crazy stretch to begin that fourth quarter. So they have to close with him now. So now he's closing. And what do they have to do defensively? They have to fully overextend to help Duncan Robinson because he's going to get picked on. They're going to use his guy as a screener every time, and they're going to kind of blitz out, show, and recover. So what does that mean? I think they went to it just because they knew they were going to have to overextend defensively and do so much late in that game to do kind of have good defensive possessions that they're like, well, instead of putting Duncan Robinson in a set defense the rest of the way, why not just try the Hacker Robinson thing so we don't have to, it gives you a better chance. So I think the Duncan element leaned into that even more heavily than anything. And so that's why we don't really see Duncan close much because of that reason. So that was just because it was a weird scenario where he was the only one who had it going. So I wouldn't expect to see that again, but it definitely caught me by surprise. That definitely wasn't a Spo thing to utilize.
That's fair. I think he actually, one part that outside of him doing it when the Knicks were at home versus the Heat were at home, I think he overthought himself, especially with Grimes and Brunson never coming off the floor. It basically just became them getting timeouts. Like 3 possessions in a row, he does it. Like Mitch goes 4 for 6 out of the line, which him going 4 for 6 already kills him doing it. Like you want him to go at least at most 3 for 6, preferably 2 for 6, if you're playing the numbers and doing that. But then he literally gave Brunson and Grimes like 4 to 6 real life minutes of like rest time. Like here, play 20 seconds defense. Oh, now you don't have to run anymore. Like I think he actually like just overplayed himself a little bit more. And as a Spoelstra defender, which I don't think he really needs defenders in any way, shape, or form. I think he's the best coach in the league at this point. Sorry, Popovich and Kerr. I'm just surprised. I think he actually I think it was just like a miscue that he read or didn't read.
Yeah, I think that point about the getting time off is actually a really good point. That is something that, we could say they're NBA players and they late in the game, Brunson probably isn't look tired. He probably still gets to his spots, but it's like those extra minutes could be key. Like those extra breaks could be key. And I guess you could say on the opposite side, well, Jimmy's getting a rest too. And it's like
he didn't play 48 though.
Yeah, but it's like he also was taking possessions off, it felt like anyway. So it's like it doesn't really add up. So it's like it did not feel like I said, it's one of those things. If Mitchell Robinson goes 1 for 6, he looks like a genius after the game. So it's just one of those things that just it either goes your way or it doesn't. And it didn't go their way in game 5. So that's I wouldn't put the blame on him. Like that's not why they lost that game. There's many more reasons to why they lost that game.
Yeah.
But it was one of the loudest things I guess you just had to evaluate.
Yeah, it's just a miscue that he did. I'm just surprised at it. Definitely the shooting or your guys' lack of shooting is why you guys really lost the game. Going back to Stugatz for a sec, is Scott Foster every Heat fan's boogeyman?
Feels like it. That's been. I woke up this morning. I see that he ended up being the lead official of the night, and I see everybody going crazy. So what is it? 0 for 10 this season. 0-10 this season. I think that's the record. No, there's just some things I just there's some things that are coincidental, and there's things like that are just a pretty wild thing. And I know he gets like the nickname the Extender.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why I think Heat fans are freaking out. So I don't know, man. We'll see what happens. I'm not even somebody that usually thinks that way about officials usually. Like I still don't. I don't think it'll have too much impact on the game, to be honest.
Same.
But
it's in the back of your head. I think as a player, it would mess with me.
It would, because I actually do. There's players that are aware, like most of the players are very aware of this. Like they're very aware of this. So we'll see what happens. I'm not too worried about it, but it is, like you said, it's in the back of your head because there's one point where you see that number and it's like, coincidence? I don't know. It's starting to get a little weird.
Yeah. It's all right. If we see Tony Brothers game 7, then it all makes sense. Then the Knicks lose in 7, and it's like, well, wow, the NBA really did that. Brady, thank you for coming on again. Last 2 questions, I'll get you out of here. It's just they're both really simple. Well, the question's simple. The answer might be harder. The New York Knicks will win tonight because of blank. Why do you think the Knicks would win?
I think because their 3 best players were their 3 best players. I think they need to win this game. I think they need all three. I don't think if one of them has kind of an inefficient night and they're in any way, shape, or form, where they're not who they were in that game 5, I think that's a problem because I don't think they're going to rely on their role players as much. We both know both teams are not relying on their 3-point shooting as much with the way that both teams have been shooting.
God, no.
So your best players have to be your best player. I trust Brunson, I think, to he'll kind of hold up his end of the bargain. The way they guard RJ is going to decide that at the start of the game for me to see how much they're going to need from him. And I guess Randle's the flip player. I think it mostly leans on him that if he can play in that type of way that he played in that second half in game 5, they pushed the Knicks in a really good position. So I think it's a lot on those 3 guys.
I agree with you entirely. I mean, the Knicks at this point are a 3-headed monster. I know a lot of the year, a lot of us, myself included at times, thought Quickly was better than Barrett. That has not proved true at all in the postseason, and Quickly is not even playing now. I think we're at the point that Mitch and Ihart are both almost interchangeable in this series. I still think Mitch is a better player overall because his defensibility is so much higher than Ihart's, but Ihart's a good defender. But because of the hack of Mitch, because of Miami just literally fouling him every time he gets the ball on a rebound or anything like that, it kind of dilutes his ability a little bit. I really think that I was going to say this before and I forgot. The way the Knicks don't play Brunson and Grimes 48 minutes is they need a first quarter lead. We haven't had the lead basically at all in Miami this series. Last game it was like for 29 seconds. That's horrendous. You don't win in any games by leading for only 29 seconds, unless the odds of you leading the last second are minuscule in that case. And they need a first quarter lead. We need to be able to get Brunson off a little bit. Give Deuce McBride, if Deuce McBride can play 4 minutes in this game because the Knicks are actually up 6 or up 7 at the end of the first, or even better yet, at the end of the third, that's going to help out so substantially. And then the same thing with Grimes and Hart. I think Hart is going to play more than he did last game. Obviously, he's probably not going to get 4 fouls in 10 minutes. But if Hart can just make a 3, if you take 3 and make 1, man, just don't. He shot the worst air ball I ever saw in my life in game 4 for the post. You know the one I'm talking about where he literally shoots it and it's like it almost landed outside the restricted area. Like that's how bad the shot was. It was absolutely unbelievable. So
I didn't know if it got blocked live. I was like, it had to have gotten tipped or something. The way
nothing.
It just got, that was a bad look.
It was rough. It was really rough. So I would say if we can get McBride to play 3-4 minutes because they're actually up a little bit and to have Hart actually be able to make a 3 to spare Grimes a little bit more, it's going to help us a lot at the end of the game. I do think the main catalysts, though, are Brunson, RJ, and Randle. With, like you said, I agree. So would our whole fan base. Randle is the ultimate wild card. Randle going in game to game, hour to hour, quarter to quarter. We do not know if he's happy, sad, miserable, angry. We don't know what's going to happen. So I agree with that. And then to the same question for the Heat. The Miami Heat will win tonight because blank.
Jimmy Butler looks like playoff Jimmy. That's where I kind of land right now. I think that you just look at the profile of these wins and losses this playoff run. It's like they lost the one game against Milwaukee just because they lose the one game against New York. I mean, without Jimmy, they lose this game when Jimmy does not look like Jimmy. And you look at the way that Jimmy's played this entire run in the wins, and it's like they just need him to be that ultra aggressor. They need him to be a guy that's going to get to the rim consistently. It's not even about the free throw line. He actually got to the free throw line a decent bit in that last game. It's more about just getting to the rim and getting good looks around there, because I just felt like he wasn't even getting the looks in that last game. I thought he just wasn't even getting to we always talk about Brunson and Jimmy, the way they get to their spots. And if they get to their spot, it's kind of game over. Brunson was getting to his spots. Jimmy, it didn't feel like he was as much. And part of that is credit to New York. I thought they peeled in a lot of help. They're throwing a lot of things at Jimmy, forcing the shooters to hit. But we've seen that before where if Jimmy is the ball handler, like I say it all the time, like you can double Jimmy in a low post. You can double Jimmy in a mid post. You cannot blitz Jimmy. Jimmy does not care about a blitz. He's going to go around the blitz. His whole goal here is to get to the rim. So that doesn't really do anything. They're going to have to peel off eventually. And that's where I thought things were weird, because they used him so much more off ball in that game 5 than they have pretty much all playoffs. Like he's been a high usage guy this entire run, where now that's where I think the big adjustment, not even an adjustment, because I just think they needed to do it anyway, but they needed to just have a high usage Jimmy Butler on ball and just let him do Jimmy things. Let him get to the basket. Let him, the Knicks kind of react to him in a way where they have to kind of move the chess pieces around the board instead of the opposite. So I guess it's a similar theme for both teams. I guess in this part of the postseason, your best players just have to be your best players. But I just feel it's a little different because I think they need all three to kind of collectively play well. Whereas Jimmy, I just think Jimmy needs to just go out there and just play at a high. It's hard to ask him to do the things that he's been doing at the peak of this playoff run, but just be somewhat of that. Like, you just have to push the right button somewhat, and I think they'll be in a decent position.
I don't think Miami needs him to drop 56 again. I think they need him. They need him to get like 30, 10, and 6, though. They need him to go LeBron status.
Mm-hmm. But
go ahead.
I was just gonna say around 30 is kind of where I see it.
Yeah, same. I mean, if you're not gonna win with him getting 19, if Miami does like outplay New York in a lot of aspects, like if Jimmy Butler's getting less than 20, it's probably not gonna happen. I'm glad you brought up the last one thing I want to bring up real quick before you go. I'm glad he actually brought up the Jimmy blitzing Jimmy on the outside thing. I remember watching game 4 and they were literally like having Gabe come over to run action with Brunson involved. So Brunson and Grimes or Brunson and Hart were both the two guys covering Gabe and Jimmy. And because Brunson is like shorter and stockier, he would like do the blitz. And then he actually basically set a pick on Hart and Jimmy was able to just run straight around him to the paint. And I was like, please to God, stop doing that. But like you said, like we should double him inside. Doubling him on the outside, man. He's too crafty. He's the perfect combination of crafty and quick and strong that blitzing him near the half court line is just not going to happen. It just doesn't work out nearly as well as they want him to.
There was a play where they ran like a horn set with Babe and Love screening on both sides. He went to his left, they blitzed. So he went back to his right. They blitzed again. He just walked around the blitz. Yeah. And he ended up getting a bucket. I think it was game 4 where he ended up doing that. And I'm like, that's why I say, like, when people were talking in the walks, there's like, oh, well, when he starts getting doubled, it's game over. When they start blitzing out of him, it's game over. I'm like, well, if he starts getting doubled down low, yeah, there's a problem. But if he starts getting blitzed, I just don't see him being phased. So the way to fix that, put him on ball as much as possible.
Exactly. And just double him inside. Don't double him outside. I think that's actually a major adjustment that Tibbs did in game 5. They let Grimes handle him on the outside and then doubled him when he got inside.
Yeah.
Brady, thank you so much for coming on again. Much appreciated. Everyone can find this man at Brady305. Do you want to plug all the other stuff you have?
Yeah, pretty much that. Twitter at BradyArc305, 5readsports.com, and the 5 on the Floor podcast.
Awesome. Brady, I don't think I'll have you on again next week because even if I wanted to have you on after the series, whichever team wins or loses, either going to have 1 or 3 days to get ready for the winner of Celtics 76ers. Mm-hmm. So there's no time for that. Also, if the Knicks lose, I'm going to be really sad. I wouldn't want to talk to you anyway.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you for coming on today, man. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go, Knicks. Peace.